It's 1986, a cave in Somerset, England. An archaeologist is cataloging bones, standard work. Thousands of fragments, most of them animal, deer, horse, aurochs. The kind of sites you find everywhere in Europe from this period. And then she picks up a human bone. That's not unusual, human remains turn up in caves. But this bone has cut marks. She looks closer, the marks are deliberate, precise, running along the shaft in exactly the pattern you'd see if someone was stripping meat from an animal. She finds more, ribs with the same marks. Leg bones split open, the same way you split a bone to get at the marrow. And then the skulls. 3 of them. Carefully shaped. The edges smoothed and worked. Someone had taken human skulls and turned them into bowls, into cups. This was 14,700 years ago. And the people who did this were not monsters. They were not sick. They were not lost or broken or separated from everything human. They were us. Here's what everyone gets wrong about this. We hear ancient cannibalism and we picture something primitive, something savage. A line between them and us that we crossed a long time ago and never looked back. That line does not exist. That line does not exist. You find not one reason, not one story. You find 3 completely different logics. 3 situations where the same act meant something entirely different. Survival, ritual, power. Each one makes sense on its own terms. Each one was a response to a specific kind of pressure. And none of them require us to imagine something inhuman. That's what makes this uncomfortable. Not that they did it, but that we understand exactly why. Let's go back further, much further. 800,000 years ago, Atapuerca, Spain. A site called Grandolina. Excavations in the 1990s uncovered something that changed the timeline entirely. Bones of Homo antecessor, one of our earliest known relatives, mixed together with animal bones in a way that told a very specific story. The human bones had the same cut marks as the deer bones beside them, the same fracture patterns, the same evidence of marrow extraction. Paleoanthropologist Tim White was direct. The technique was identical to food processing. There was no ceremonial arrangement, no burial, no indication of anything other than the systematic processing of meat. This was not ritual, this was a meal. Then come the Neanderthals, 120,000 years ago, Moulin-Gercy Cave, France. 6 Neanderthals, bones broken open in a specific sequence, limbs first, then torso, then skull. The brain had been accessed through deliberate openings. The marks suggest this was done while the bodies were still fresh. What makes this site particularly striking is who the victims were. Genetic analysis suggests they were related to the individuals who processed them. This was not strangers eating strangers. This was something happening inside the group. One more site. Krapina, Croatia, 130,000 years ago. Over 900 Neanderthal bone fragments from at least 80 individuals processed in the same way as large game animals. Skulls cracked open, long bones split for marrow. Researchers are still debating survival, ritual, or something in between. What they are not debating is the scale. This was not one desperate moment. This was a pattern. And then Gough's Cave, back to 14,700 years ago in England. The skulls were not just used, they were crafted. The edges were carefully trimmed and smoothed, a process that would have taken significant time and effort. Someone chose to make these objects, chose to keep them, chose to drink from them. That is not desperation, that is intention. Now picture a different scenario entirely. A group of 20 people, deep winter. The migration patterns of the animals they depend on have shifted. They haven't eaten in 6 days. 3 people are already too weak to walk. And then someone dies. Not from violence, from cold, from exhaustion, from the body simply stopping. The body is there, the group is starving. This is the moment where every moral framework built during good times runs directly into the wall of biological necessity. The body needs calories to survive. Without calories, more people die. The math is simple and it is brutal. The human body begins consuming itself after roughly 3 days without food. First fat reserves, then muscle. By day 7, organ function starts to decline. By day 10, the brain begins to shut down non-essential processes. A starving person watching another person die is not making a philosophical choice. They are watching the clock run out. The body already knows what it needs. Survival cannibalism is not a failure of humanity. It is what humanity does when the alternative is extinction. We saw this in 1972. A plane carrying a Uruguayan rugby team crashed in the Andes. 16 people survived for 72 days in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. They made the same calculation that ancient humans made. And they survived because of it. When they came home, the world did not condemn them. It understood. The four people of Papua New Guinea practiced what they called mortuary cannibalism until the 20th century. Eating the deceased was considered an act of respect. The body returned to the living rather than being lost to the earth. The consequence was a prion disease called kuru, spread through the consumption of infected brain tissue. Entire villages were decimated over generations. But the practice came from real logic, from a genuine framework of meaning that had nothing to do with cruelty. The third reason is the one that takes the longest to understand. Across dozens of cultures studied by anthropologists, from the Amazon to the Pacific Islands to pre-colonial North America, there is a recurring belief that consuming part of an enemy or a respected elder or a great warrior transfers something essential. Not metaphorically, literally. Strength, courage, knowledge, spirit. In a world without books, without written records, without any way to preserve what a person knew or was, the body itself became the vessel. Maori warriors in New Zealand consumed the hearts of fallen enemies, not as degradation, as acknowledgement of their power. The greatest enemies deserved the greatest respect, and the greatest respect meant taking what they carried inside them. Some Amazon tribes practiced endocannibalism, consuming their own dead, specifically so that the person's essence would remain within the community rather than returning to the earth as a stranger. The dead became part of the living, literally and permanently. Think about what that solves. In a world with no graveyards, no monuments, no way to write down who someone was, consuming them was the only form of remembrance that worked. The only way to keep someone present. It is the most human impulse imaginable, dressed in the most uncomfortable form. We have a category error when we think about this. We assume that because something is disturbing to us now, it must have been disturbing to them then. We project our framework backward. But the framework is ours, not theirs. In 2001, a German man named Armin Maiwes advertised online for a willing victim. He found one. What followed was documented, consensual, and resulted in criminal charges that took courts years to define, because no legal framework quite covered it. The case was disturbing precisely because the old categories didn't apply. More quietly, organ donation asks us to decide in advance whether our bodies can be used by others after death. Most people in modern societies say yes. The logic and that the body can serve the living after the person is gone is not far from what the Fori people believed. We have not moved as far as we think. What we have done is build systems that remove the necessity. Food security means survival cannibalism is almost never the only option. Medical science means we process grief differently. Law means conflict has other channels. The pressure is gone. The instinct that responded to that pressure, the one that kept groups alive through impossible winters, through famines, through the deaths of the people they depended on most, that instinct was never removed. It was simply made unnecessary. Back to that cave in Somerset. Someone spent time on those skulls, careful time. The kind of attention you give to something that matters. We look at those objects and we see evidence of something wrong. Something that separates those people from us by a distance we can barely measure. But the person who made them, what did they see? Maybe a way to hold on to someone they lost, maybe a vessel for something sacred, maybe proof that survival at any cost had been possible, that the group had made it through something that should have ended them. We will never know the specific meaning. That is gone. What is not gone is the logic underneath it, the pressure that produced it. The fact that faced with an identical situation, true isolation, true starvation, true loss, human beings across every culture and every era have arrived at the same answers. Not because they were primitive, because they were solving the same problems we would face. The cave is empty now. The skulls are in a museum case under glass, but the questions they raise have no case around them. They are still open.